Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Billy D's podcast. I'm absolutely thrilled that you are here sitting in with me today. My co-host this evening is Jack Casey. And what's going on, Jack?
Hey everybody, welcome to my magical studio kitchen. You can't see the dirty dishes or the anything else, but I'll give you all a full tour, but I still have shame.
I see. I understand. We usually give people a few moments to lock onto the stream. So while we do that, I just want to tell everyone that you can find the Billy D's podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. That's where the lion's share of our listens come from. And tonight we are live on Facebook on the Billy D's podcast Facebook page. And we're also live on YouTube. So I obviously you have the ability to check us out live there. The audio, of course, later on we'll put on all the major networks: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, and on down the line. Now, what's interesting. Well, I've been well established on those platforms for a long time, but probably the last 6 months, last part of the year, I decided to try to cultivate YouTube and Facebook. And this was odd to me. I kind of expected a lot of views. And I never wanted to be a YouTuber per se. I always wanted it to support the podcast. But I expected a lot more views on YouTube and not so much on Facebook. And it's been the other way around. In the last couple of weeks, I had Linda Day Smith, who is the author of Standing Against the Rage, and Deborah Fazell, who is the author of Full Circle. Both of these are for HO Press Shorehouse Books. And just on Facebook alone, not getting into the major podcast carriers, but just the podcast on Facebook alone, both of those episodes had thousands of listens, thousands. And I always get more listens off of the audio platforms. I always expect that, but I didn't expect the disparity between Facebook and YouTube so far. YouTube, very little. Facebook video, very strong. And like I said, I'm well established on the audio platforms. It's usually 10-1, the listens that I get on those as opposed to either video format. But here again, Facebook, I did not expect to have thousands of listens and views on the Facebook page. So that was kind of an interesting thing for me there.
Yeah, that's really cool, man.
Yeah, I'm happy about that. And what's interesting too is I don't necessarily have a lot of subscribers on Facebook. So these things are making their way around based on subjects and hashtags and just interest, which is kind of cool. And I have promoted them from time to time, but usually just small amounts, like $10 or something just to kickstart them. So it's been kind of interesting. Now coming in off the major networks, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all that, Bangladesh has risen as a place that gets listens. Columbus, Ohio, which doesn't surprise me because I'm based in Ohio, and Mountain View, California, consistently. A lot of listens out there. So I want to say hi to all those folks. As people are coming in and actually checking things out, what we're going to talk about today is a couple things. Obviously, what happened at the Capitol building is going to be a subject. Trump in general, politics in general, social media, what is free speech and what isn't, and some other things. So we're going to kind of go down that road. Let me lead off here if I can, Jack. Let me just say, generally speaking, I can't be defined, I don't think, as a liberal or a conservative. I'm not either one. I don't believe in those filters. And those filters, let's say 30 or 40 years ago, meant a certain, what's the word I'm looking for? Meant a certain philosophy. They, you had a different way or a certain set of principles in the way you judge something, but they're not that anymore. In a lot of cases, they're cults. Conservatism and liberalism, these left and right views have become cults. They've become bubbles. They've become alternate realities. And in terms of how elections are sold, and they are sold, they are brands. You are buying a brand when you subscribe to these ideologies, I guess. You are buying a brand in
Well,
that.
it's pretty much sports teams with no ball and different letterings, if you really think about it.
Yeah. And some of the things we might talk about today might inflame some of you. But if you're telling yourself that the world is going to be a better place or a worse place based upon who the president is, you're buying a brand, because that's not really the case. Um, what's been happening that concerns me, Jack, over the past 30 or 40 years is the economic structure has shifted towards the very top. And it sounds like a cliche to say, oh, it's the top 1% that have all the money, but it's actually worse than that. It's a
Mhm.
fraction of that 1%. Okay. And you can give the economic recoveries you can give that credit to Obama, Trump, whoever you want. But the trend has been that when the economy is really good, the top benefits. When the economy is really bad, the top benefits. Just like right now, small business is suffering, but if you're a major merchandiser online or whatever, you're doing really well. Isn't that amazing? A good or a bad economy always affects the top people.
I gotta say, the way that Amazon leveraged the pandemic was pretty brilliant and as a business move. You know, people can't leave their houses or
Yeah,
won't leave their houses, so why not, push? Hey, you can just click a button here and put in your credit card number, and we'll send you anything. We'll
exactly.
send you a giant teddy bear, food. You can buy milk on Amazon. I don't know if you wanted a 55-gallon drum of lube, you can get that. I mean, whatever your thing lies in.
I'll bring it right to you. Yeah. And what I'm getting at is, while we are fighting over breadcrumbs and we're divided on income, we're divided on religion, we're divided on politics, we're divided on race, we're divided on whatever, we got a million different ways to kill each other over the breadcrumbs. And while we're doing that, the economic structure of this country, and indeed the world, is rapidly becoming an economic oligarchy.
Oh yeah.
And it's getting to the point where what we do every 4 years with these elections is we shuffle things around a little bit. We put a little bit of the branded conservatives over here and a little bit of the liberals over there. And then the next 4 years, okay, we put these liberals over here and we put these conservatives over here. And it gives us all the feeling that we actually have some say in what's going on.
Oh,
But
this year the Democrats won the political Super Bowl. I mean,
yeah,
more like the World Cup actually, because that only happens every 4 years too. you know,
yes,
um, I
and
guess you could call the representative or House of Representatives elections and the midterms like the Olympics every year. You got the
yep,
Democrat and the Republican Olympics. Oh God, it's gotten so ridiculous.
yeah.
But,
And just like the Olympics, they impact our lives. I don't want to say not at all, because that's not true. But the fact of the matter is your local councilman, your state representative probably has, in terms of politics, a lot more influence over your daily life than the president of the United States does. And a lot of people don't even know those people's names. They don't even know who those people are.
I could tell you I couldn't name any of my city council. I couldn't name the mayor here because I don't pay much attention to it.
Yeah.
Um, I also don't live in the nicest area either, but you
Well,
know,
we'll burn down cities based upon who we believe the president is,
mhm.
and what they're going to do for us. And the fact of the matter is, it's actually very little, very
I mean,
little.
there are some things that the feds and all that do impact your life on. It's just you really have to look for it.
Yeah, you
Um,
hear so much about the economy and interest rates and the stock market, but the Fed has a lot more direct impact on that than the president does. You're right. Yeah.
right. Um, But I
But
mean, it's not like Donald Trump's going to knock on your door and hand you a check or see if you need your sidewalk shoveled or any of that. Neither is Joe Biden or anyone else. Um, I guess we all kind of have to have being a tribal type people, we have to have some kind of leader to look up to and all that. It's an inherent thing in humanity. But I mean, if you really break it down, I mean, the biggest thing that would change a lot of people's lives, lately that's in the big spotlight would be, dropping drug laws and stuff like that.
yeah.
But that's probably not happening anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, like I
Tax
said,
cuts, I mean, they talk about these giant tax cuts and all that, and 99% of us aren't going to see any
yeah.
noticeable difference, which was what blows my mind when you see people saying, oh, the president's going to raise taxes. And well, do you make $400,000 a year? Well, I mean, I don't, but I might someday. Dude, you work at a gas station. I don't think that's happening in near future, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Um, it's just it's funny how delusional people have gotten too. I mean, other stuff that wouldn't really affect your life that much. I have had 3 customers in the past week try and start arguments with me about 5G.
Oh, really?
Now, before the past week, it came up maybe once ever. But yeah, 3 of them past week. Just offhand, like, I'm like, here you go, have a good day. Hey, that 5G thing, it's gonna like fry your brain and all that. I'm like, dude, I think your brain's already fried, but I can't really say that to you because I'll get in trouble and I just don't feel like dealing with it. But yeah, it's just weird. Like ever since the thing at the Capitol, like I've had a lot more people walking through the store, like wearing, political paraphernalia, a lot more Trump than Biden because I live in Trump country.
Yeah.
But it's bizarre, like this weird rah for my team that's gonna affect me as much as the football game does. I'll get upset
Yeah.
about it, but the Browns win. I mean, you're not gonna get like another check. You're not gonna get any other little benefit out of it. It's just, your
Yeah.
team won.
I'm
So
old enough to remember the power lines. Those were the boogeymen of the 1980s, just like
mhm.
the 5G is now. The power lines were the boogeymen during the 1980s. These things were going to just destroy your life.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And yeah. So yeah. But anyway, let's go. Let me get to the Capitol. And like I said, one of the reasons why I wanted to preface that I don't have an ideological filter on this is I believe I'm very consistent. I've heard a lot of comparisons to what happened at the Capitol to the demonstrations and what in some cases what turned into riots last summer. And I'm very consistent on this. I understand the need for demonstration. I believe it is a useful force, and I understand sometimes that can spill over into what you might call a civil disruption of some kind where
Mhm.
people block traffic. They make a lot of noise. I don't know, maybe turn over some trash cans or whatever. I don't particularly. That's not my way of communicating. But that type of thing really doesn't just make me nuts or make me afraid or feel that our society is crumbling when that type of thing happens.
No.
I believe it's a useful tool. However, when you start to get into entering an occupied structure, whether it's a business or a home, forcibly. Okay, you're breaking windows, you're throwing bricks through the window. There's people inside that are terrified. At that point, you are now, when those people do something to defend themselves, they hit you on the head with a bat or they shoot you or whatever it is that they do,
Mhm.
you have to accept the fact that those people were in fear. And typically, if you're empathetic to that particular cause, you're going to make excuses for them. There's all these stories that come out afterwards about what a wonderful person was that this person got killed while they were quote unquote demonstrating or quote unquote trespassing.
Right.
But in actuality, what they were doing was breaking and entering and terrorizing people. And when all these stories, well, this person was going to school and they were going to find a cure for cancer and they were going to make the world a better place.
Oh, I
That
hate that so much. Like you'll see some dude who got busted for like he was breaking into houses, and then some homeowner
Yep,
like blows his head off, and then everybody's like, "Oh, but young Jim, he was a high school student. He was gonna go to college as a
yep.
star athlete. Well, then why didn't he get a job to buy those new shoes, you
Yes,
idiot?"
exactly. And you know what? Sometimes I don't doubt that the hammer falls on the wrong people. I would be willing to bet that people sometimes get pulled into the meat grinder that aren't necessarily the worst offenders. But here's the
Right.
thing: when you decide to ask for that kind of trouble, you can't complain when it's given to you.
Oh
Okay, when
man, have you
you,
seen these guys getting interviewed by the news after the riots, like
oh
saying,
yeah,
"Oh, I
it's
can't
nuts.
believe they maced me. They just shoved me down and like they shot one of us." Like, well, what the hell did you think was going to happen? You
Yeah,
busted into the U.S. Capitol. You were
yeah,
assaulting cops with Blue Lives Matter flags, which is the most ironic thing I've ever heard in my life. And
yep,
then you go and you're going to try and break in and break these windows and try and actually grab legislators and other people in power in our country. And one of y'all gets shot. You're like, oh well. I can't believe you did that. Like,
yeah, yeah.
I
You
just,
can't.
what did you think was going to happen? You're going to
Yeah,
bust into the U.S. Capitol building. They were going to hand you like some milk and cookies, maybe a bottle of wine, and have some candles lit. Just be like,
exactly.
oh, welcome all protesters. You want to break that statue over there? you
Yeah,
know,
and it's real
it's,
easy. It's
oh,
real easy to get manipulated by the causes of some of these events. We'll call them. I could go to downtown and go to the square and some of the statues and artwork they have down there. I could pour gas all over them, light them on fire. And when the police come, I'd say, wait a minute, you don't understand. I'm trying to raise awareness for world hunger. Okay. It just, it just can't be that every cause it gives legitimacy to burning down our cities, burning down our governmental buildings. I don't care. I'm very consistent on this. I don't care if these people are from the left or the right. When you take things to that level, you have to accept what comes your way. I just that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Well, they
Um,
sure sent their best men, didn't they?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The latest thing today, I've been watching videos of the protesters getting kicked off the airplanes because they got put on no-fly lists. And
Yeah,
they're just crying about, I was just there to defend my country. It's like, no, you were there to try and perform a coup after a legitimate election was being
yeah.
counted. There's a difference between like fighting for rights like free speech and
Sure.
this. I mean,
Yeah, and here again, I can understand people are very passionate about these causes, and they might very well believe them. But when you get to the point where you're breaking into buildings,
mhm.
whether they're commercial buildings, homes, governmental buildings, and you're terrorizing the people that are inside, especially when they're occupied. When you
Yeah,
got
yeah.
people that are standing back against the wall like they're terrified, at that point, it's very hard to sell me on your cause. And
They
I
should be
don't.
thanking their lucky stars. More of them didn't get iced by the
Oh yeah,
feds. I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that one guy who fired the one shot, did you see that?
Fired the one shot.
Okay,
Not
so there was a group of them. It was the woman who died who had the Trump cape on, the
right.
veteran. Which, first
I
of all,
I I
dude,
that
you're a
video I
veteran.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, you did see that, right?
Yeah, right, mhm.
That cop right there, the Capitol Police officer, I believe. I'm not a huge fan of cops, but like, I want to buy that guy a beer because he took one shot and it stopped all of them from getting into the chambers where all the
Yeah,
legislators were,
yeah,
and he didn't injure anybody else. I mean, if it would have been another cop or someone else with a different mindset or was more in fear, I mean, they could have just unloaded a clip into that hallway and killed a bunch of them. And
yeah,
honestly, I wouldn't have had any sympathy for him.
yeah.
I mean, you
Here's here again, I wanna stress to the audience that I'm being consistent on this. When you're defending yourself, no matter what the cause is, and I would be willing to bet there's some consistency here. I would be willing to bet that most of the people I'm acquainted, I wouldn't say I know them. I'm acquainted with some people that were there. And they pretty much are in agreement. The vast majority of that crowd there in Washington that day was a bunch of boomers standing around BSing about how the world's going to hell. Okay. Most of them did not participate in this. That's true. And I've been willing to bet a lot of the riots last year that were not representative of the vast majority of people who wanted social justice. I don't doubt that. And I also don't doubt that there were instigators there. I don't doubt at many of these places there are people there that are whose intention it is to throw gas on the fire.
mm,
I don't doubt that at all. I believe that when we analyze these things, we have to you know give that to everyone that there's a certain amount of, it's not everyone. There's people who are taking advantage of the situation and so on, but that does not excuse the people who are direct participants in what generally amounts to terrorizing other people.
mhm.
I wish that we could stand united and say that anybody who does this for any reason, no matter what they claim their cause is, it can't be tolerated. Um, I don't know. Did you want to follow up with that on anything? Under
I'm kind of torn on the whole. I mean, granted, it was for an idiotic cause that this happened. And
Yeah,
Trump very much did escalate it. He very much did point.
yeah,
He pointed the gun full of protesters and fired. The thing is, though, over the past 30, 40 years, our politicians have lost a lot of fear of the general public, and they no longer represent anything. I mean, you don't see. I would like to see more protests, more things getting done about our atrocious healthcare system in this country, the flopped pandemic, the um, social mobility, the fact that we just keep handing these rich people and these corporations tons of money that they just stick in a safe in the wall rather than
Yeah.
actually hire more people or help the economy or any of that. I mean, there are millions of other causes, and in a way, I mean, maybe it is a little bit more beneficial because revolutions don't happen peacefully. A lot of times, the people don't get their voices heard, and there's no societal change unless there are a few eggs that are cracked. And I mean, I hate to say it, but it is kind of human nature. It's like if you're not going to directly threaten my position or threaten my life, then why am I going to try and do anything for you when I can just keep it all for me?
Yeah.
And I think this was it's kind of a combination of just the cultist mentality that Trump has kind of established. All right, I have a question, Billy. Suppose you were in a coma for the past like 40 years and you just woke
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
and you had knew nothing about the man. You just saw this Trump guy, up there talking, doing his thing. Wouldn't it baffle you as to why people are so rabid about following him?
Yeah.
I mean, you get this guy who's up there talking nonsense and calling other people names and all that, and he's the president. I mean, I would think that, if I was an outsider, I just woke up from a coma too, I'd be like, why? I don't get it. I don't get.
Well, that speaks to us as a people because going back 40 years, the politicians were generally statesmen. I mean, even Ronald Reagan got dismissed as quote unquote just an actor, but that wasn't fair. He was involved in politics for decades leading
Mhm.
up to his election. He was the governor of California.
Right.
And a lot of people have said the best preparation for being president of the United States is being a governor, especially of one like California, which is one of the largest economies in the world.
Well, it's the next
Okay.
stepping stone in the executive hierarchy. I mean, you have
Yeah,
state and then
and so you had people who were statesmen, and now we have and Elon Musk made uh, I'll spare everybody the nuances of the tweet, but he basically made a comment about the evolution of social media and what it has done, and I think that social media has fed into it. The standard media, the 24 hours news cycle, the chasing of ratings for the sake of news, has created a pulp culture that is very misleading, and the general public buys into it. They
Mhm.
watch news that pleases them. They
Right.
watch news that feeds what they've already determined to be true. They don't want to hear news or commentary that challenges their opinion.
Or it makes them
And
uncomfortable.
yeah, and what you have now is you have people who are manipulating that.
Hmm.
They are manipulating that, just like I said, what was once conservatism in terms of Ronald Reagan, and by the way, he wouldn't be conservative enough by today's standards.
Oh no.
He actually had some common sense. And same with somebody like JFK, liberal for his time, but not by today's standards. He
Oh
actually
no.
lived in the real world. And these brands now have been molded, packaged, and sold to the public for the sake of votes, and unfortunately works. And that's kind of where we're at. So when you qualify, when you make these what about these statesmen of now versus 40 years ago? You got to keep in mind that the people have changed. They're saying the things they say because they work.
Right.
And I often have people ask me, why does during every election, you hear see all these negative ads all the time? They're there because they work. They
Oh
wouldn't
yeah.
be
Nobody
spending hundreds
focuses
of
on
millions
that.
of dollars on these ads if they didn't work.
Oh no, well, nobody focuses on the positive, uplifting stories. I mean,
Yeah,
it's part of the reason that you see the huge backlash against, say, police, which a lot of it is very much justified. But I mean, which is going to get more clicks, like cop shoots black guy or cop rescues puppy? No
yeah,
one cares about the puppy.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Yeah,
um,
and it's what's going there's a very cynical saying about the news, and that is if it bleeds, it leads. But it's
oh,
true.
absolutely. Oh, very
You know,
much so. I went through
yeah,
journalism school for most of it. I dropped out toward the end because I saw where it was going, where news was going. Plus, it was right when the internet was taking over anyway, and journalism jobs just went down.
yeah,
Um, but just kind of watching these networks just spend all their time scaring the hell out of people, and
yeah.
I don't find that psychologically healthy. I
It's not.
mean, it's because you get these people living in fear, and once you scare them enough, of course they're going to snap, like kind of like what happened at the Capitol last week.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily I don't know that I've watched the entire video from beginning to end of what Trump said prior to what happened at the Capitol. I
I
can't
did.
really find evidence that he said, conduct a siege on the Capitol. But what I will say is this: he most certainly promoted the conspiracy theory that a landslide election was
Yes,
overturned.
I
Y-
watched it.
And
Um,
go
he
ahead.
started out with the whole landslide election, like, oh, we didn't lose, which he very much did, and then directed them to go to the Capitol and enter in, and saying that we have to fight to save our country. I'm paraphrasing, but he very much did incite that riot, like that. If he
Yeah.
would not have made that speech right beforehand, I don't think they would have broken into the Capitol building.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Um,
I don't know, but there's no question
I saw
that
it on Break at
he
Work. It
will
was on
he
Twitter.
still has not backed down on
No.
this the election being a fraud. And I kind of come from the world of science and logic in terms of the things that I aspire to. And what we might call an absolute truth is very elusive. So in science, what we do is we kind of go with what is most likely. And what is most likely the case is generally what is true.
All right.
And if we find evidence otherwise, we adjust it. So if you want me to believe that there was a landslide, a record landslide election for Trump that was overturned, keeping in mind that every state has different procedures that have to be approved by the federal government, but they have
Hmm.
different sets and practices. And all of these people, which certainly number in the thousands,
Hmm.
conspired to create votes or destroy votes.
And not a single person has felt guilty and said anything.
And not a
Not
single
one.
person has said a word, that's it's been just smooth. And I've known, I work in an industry where a lot of people do community work. And a lot of these people that work at these polling places, they don't get paid a lot of times.
Hmm.
They get paid very little. And the grief that they go through from some of these people that go through those voting booths on voting day, I don't know why they do it.
Well, the other
I
part too is like these unpaid poll workers. I mean, so you're basically not paying them to commit a bunch of felonies
Yes, and they're
if
doing it
they're
just
found
because they
out.
believe in the cause, and they're doing it with expert. I mean, this is fraud on a master thief level.
Well, the interesting thing too is that every single like actual case of election fraud that they found, which hasn't been many, it's been like less than 10, I think, were all in favor of Trump. They were
Yeah,
all people who voted multiple times for him or used their dead parent or
yeah,
whatever. And yet they use that projection to say, "Oh, it's not me, it's you." I mean, it's like you catch
yeah,
your partner cheating, and he's like, "Yeah, well, you looked at that other guy last week, and so you're the cheater now." And it
yeah.
absolutely works on people.
Sure.
I mean,
Well, and here again, you're always going to find some evidence of that. You're always going to find an isolated case, and it may not be so isolated. Maybe it is more problematic than what we're saying, where there has been fraud on one side or the other, and one side or the other always points it out and says, "Well, if that happens, then it's possible." But in the amount of fraud that would have had to take place to take a landslide election, which would be millions upon millions of votes and in some well-crafted, orchestrated way across the country in a uniform manner, coordinated through all the states.
yeah,
This happened. It's just not realistic.
that's the same
And
reason that we all called BS on the 9/11 truthers back in the day. It's like, so the government flew planes into buildings or blew them up internally and made it look like a plane did it, and thousands of people were involved, and nobody's gotten guilty and said
nobody said
anything.
a word. Yeah.
Okay,
And the amount, and that's a whole nother subject on itself. I mean, I did a whole
right.
routine about that, a couple of years ago
It's
where,
kind of similar though if you think
yeah,
about it.
yeah.
Okay,
The amount of wire that would have to be run through buildings those size to have a
all right.
controlled detonated explosion would be miles. Okay.
It,
And of course these are finished buildings. They're not like in the framing stage where you can easily run wires. So all
you
these
think
wires
somebody
would,
would notice there's a lot of drilling going
yeah,
on?
there's a lot of drilling, a lot of fishing up and down wires with the yeah, but no, no,
We're
no, nobody
fixing the
noticed.
internet.
Yeah. So the other thing I want to talk about is I'll tell you one of the most misunderstood understood concepts that we have in our society right now is that of free speech.
Hmm.
Free speech provisions, as provided by the Constitution, are actually pretty narrow, and a lot of people think that free speech is some sort of a shield that you can go into the public or online or what have you and just say whatever you want with impunity. And that is not true.
I mean, you can say whatever you want. It's just there's no with impunity part.
Yeah, and here's the thing, it applies most directly to governmental censorship when you're criticizing the government,
Hmm.
okay? It doesn't say anything about coming on there and talking about, who your next door neighbor is sleeping with. That
Right.
isn't protected under free speech at all. It's not. And some of these, platforms now, I've heard a lot of conservatives say that this is a violation of free speech, taking people off of a given social media platform. And I've heard liberals say, well, that's not true because they're a private company. And both of these arguments have merit. They're actually, it's more nuanced than that. It is true that when you sign up for a social media platform, you agree to their terms,
Hmm.
which means that if you violate those terms, you can be taken off, and free speech in that regard will not protect you. On a more subtle level, okay, in the way that the structure, and I have a feeling that this has stirred up a lot. I have a feeling there's going to be some legislation now that's going to be more clear about how private companies are governing the felicitation of free speech. But that's another subject. Let's kind of put that aside. The nuance to this is if you're going to apply those standards, okay, to, let's say, you can't say this or you can't say that, are you applying it equally? Now that's where they can be violating free market rules. Just like if somebody comes into my store and I say you can't come in without shoes on, and you can't come back in here until you get some shoes on. That's fine. That's well within my rights to say that as a business owner, and it's actually well within my right to say you can't come in here without a mask on. It's there's no point in arguing about it, feeling that your rights are being violated. If you want to come into this store where I'm hanging a shingle and it's my store, and I say you have to wear a mask, you have to wear a mask. Period.
Well, really, it's your property. You can kick out anyone for any reason you want.
Exactly, and this principle applies to free speech platforms. But here's the kicker. Okay, if somebody else comes in my store and they don't have a mask on or they don't have shoes on, and I say, hey, it's okay for you. I'll give you your cupcakes or whatever it is that you want. That's different because that's discrimination. Okay. And what you're going to have now in the courts is you're going to have, are these standards being equally applied? Okay, that's where the trouble is going to come. And quite frankly, last summer there were people who instigated, these protests that turned violent. There have been young people in particular, who have bullied other ones into committing suicide, into dying by suicide. So, how are we going to come up with a system where these standards are always equally and totally applied?
I don't think you can,
Yeah,
to be completely
I don't know
honest.
that you can, and that's gonna become a problem.
Well, there's
That
also the town square argument as well, as these social media platforms, especially the big ones, became so ubiquitous to where, you're not going to have speech heard unless it goes through these platforms. I mean, at that point, does it become a public forum?
Yes.
So, like for example, and the other thing too is that people say, well, if you don't like it, go make your own platform. Well, you saw the thing with Parlor this past week, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
there
most
were
of those
servers
people
and
on there,
everything, yeah,
and my thing is too is like the it gives credit card companies and payment processors a lot or way too much power as well. I mean,
yeah,
Parlor got shut down because they couldn't make money anymore because the credit card companies took away their merchant status.
yeah,
And the thing is, you're giving these bankers and all that, the power to say, well, I don't agree with this. And I think that's kind of wrong as well. So, they'll migrate to another platform and then that platform will get taken down. And the thing is you're always going to have these, these types like these insurrectionists or other idiots, sexist people, racist people, whatever. They're going to be in society. They're not going away. They're not
yeah,
a thing that magically came forth when the internet became a thing. And so the thing is, like, what are you going to do with them? I mean, I support keeping stuff like Parler up because then it keeps them quarantined away from the rest of us. You
Yeah, I
know,
don't necessarily.
I,
I think one of the another misconception about free speech is free speech is okay except for hate speech, and it's not the other way around. Hate speech is part of it,
well, hate
and
speech also, it depends on who you ask if it's hate
yeah,
speech or
exactly. It's
not.
very subjective. Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's like that, I know pornography when I see it court case. I mean,
Yeah.
it's what's offensive to one person may not be offensive to another. Like, for example, I have a coworker who's trans, and we joke around a lot. And, I say stuff like, oh, well, I see there's like, you're gonna have kids, there's a turkey baster in your future, or whatever, and she thinks it's funny. Now, if I would have gone on Twitter and said something like that,
Oh
I
yeah.
would be shot right off of there so quickly. I
Yes.
mean, it's part of the reason I don't comment much on Twitter because I feel like I'd get in a fight with all these people. But I mean, it's very subjective, or I have a black friend who makes black jokes all the time, but other people would say, "Oh, that's the worst thing I've ever heard."
Yeah.
And it just people are all different, and what these companies and everything are trying to do with enforcing these standards is kind of racist or sexist or whatever in itself, because you're saying, oh, well, you're black or you're Asian or Jewish or gay or whatever, so automatically you have these opinions, and that's not true at all.
Yeah.
you know
And
so
I would make the argument too that silencing some of these groups is not always the best thing, and when they're out in the open is oftentimes when you can monitor them the best.
right.
And a lot of people see with COVID now, and that's another thing we haven't really talked about. You have a pressure cooker in society right now because they feel not only is their ability to speak being diminished, but they feel that economically, whether it be
Mhm.
by conspiracy or whether it be by chance, they are also being suppressed. And when you have people that feel that they are being held down, that is a very viable a petri dish to yield radicalism. It
Right.
really is. And I just don't feel that that's a good thing for society. Before we go, I do want to ask you about this impeachment movement. We're live today. This is Monday, January 11th. This particular podcast, obviously can be listened to at any time on demand. But at this time, at the time we're live and we are producing this, there's talk now, there's movement of impeaching Donald Trump. Now, I'd like to get your take on that. My particular, I'm kind of my thing is, he's got a week left. I believe that Democrats are probably trying to make sure they can't run again.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably the motivation. But in the meantime, while all this is going on, what's going on in Congress that's benefiting you at home? If you're suffering financially right now because of COVID or emotionally because of COVID, whether it be what's going to be done about this virus, what's the vaccine going to be like? Are they going to come up with another stimulus package? Who's
Mhm.
working on all this while the political shenanigans are going on with the impeachment again and the inauguration and all this other stuff that here again is doing nothing to improve your life? Absolutely nothing. What's your take on the impeachment talk now?
Well, he deserves it. I mean, he deserves to be convicted and removed from office, but it's not going to get done in the time before he's gone anyway.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like it's going to stoke the fire of some more of these, extreme right and other people who want reasons to go and cause trouble.
Yeah.
I think it should happen because it, we've been letting him get away with stuff for 4 years now and doing nothing about it. Now he literally sends a riot of people at his colleagues in Congress, and there has to be some kind of punishment. I mean, you don't just you don't have a toddler who keeps hitting his sister and you just say, "Hey, now, stop," and
Yeah.
expect him to stop hitting his sister. I mean, he's
Yeah.
just going to keep getting worse and worse, especially with these calls um to what is basically insurrection.
Yeah.
Um, and I would like to see this relief stuff go through, but the problem is also you got to keep in mind until the Democrats take over the Senate on the 20th as well. I mean, none of that's going to go through anyway. Mitch is
Exactly.
still in power. There's nothing you can do. I mean, sure, you can write up the legislation, which I'm sure is being done right now. It's just there's not going to be any voting on it until they can actually vote on it.
Yeah, there's always a reason they can't help the poor people. And that's there's
It's just
always a reason,
inconvenient,
like, yeah,
Right.
there's always some reason. Well, we don't have the seats yet. We don't have
I
this, but
got
when
a
it comes
tennis
to
game to
just stirring up
play.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah, so that's my only thing with impeachment is this is the latest thing to get all riled up about. But for the people out there that need help, it's a distraction,
Yeah,
and the inauguration I hope does not turn into a circus.
it will.
That would be. Let me talk about Mike Pence before we wrap up. We're
Mhm.
getting close on time, but I believe that he has unfairly been labeled as a bad guy, and I don't believe that he is. His religion and his views about religion scare me a little bit.
I'm going to agree to disagree on the Mike Pence not being a bad person thing, but we'll go
But
on.
okay, but I believe the way he handled himself at the Capitol building, the way he said that there's nothing wrong with this election,
Hmm.
and the way he put that through and spoke very respectfully to both houses, not just the both houses, but both parties, I believe spoke a lot about who he is.
Well, if he
Uh,
was such a great guy, though, why didn't he start speaking out about some of this stuff years ago? I mean, the
well,
only
yeah,
reason I think he turned on Trump is because Trump directly threatened him. You
mhm,
didn't see any turn until that happened. And once again, it's the self serving thing that you see with a lot of politicians, especially in the right wing. Until
yeah.
something affects me, either I don't care about it or I'm against it.
Well, when you're the number 2 guy, I would put to put yourself in his shoes, when you're the vice president, and at the time, for a lot of Trump's presidency, his polling numbers were very high. He was a popular president for a while. And, to go against the job that you were hired to do, which is back up the president,
Mhm.
um, that's kind of a tough call. And I believe when the time was right, he did the right thing. Now, the only thing that I would say about this whole situation, I don't believe an impeachment is a good idea. For one thing, I don't think the Democrats can get it done. They don't, like you pointed out, they don't have the votes yet. And number two, the country is so divided right now that would cause even more of a polarization. And whether or not it's worth it or not, I don't know. But I would say,
Honestly, I think we should just do the invoke the 25th.
well,
At this
that's
point.
the one point I was going to say. If I was a Republican right now, I know Trump said that he was going to have a peaceful transfer of power. I know that's what he said recently, but he's also said he ain't
It's
leaving. And
been peaceful so far, hasn't it?
he said that on numerous occasions that he won the election and he was going to fight to the very end.
Mhm.
So what I would not want if I was a Republican and I cared about my party, what I would not want on inauguration day is some scene on the world stage where Biden is being sworn in and you have a split screen. You have on one side, Biden is being sworn in. And on the other side of the split screen, you have Trump being dragged out of the White House. I, that would be a disaster for Republicans.
Oh yeah.
That would be an absolute disaster. And just like they had the talk, the quote unquote, the talk with Nixon,
Mhm.
a bunch of Republicans came to the White House and had the talk and said, here's the reality, here's your future, and here's the best way out.
Right.
I kind of wonder if at some point, if the Republican leadership starts to get the idea that Trump isn't leaving, that they are going to have a talk with Mike
Mhm.
Pence. And that would be, I believe, a very sad day for America if that had to happen. But to square up with legitimacy in terms of what the Republicans would be faced with on a disaster on January 20th, where that scene is playing out across the world,
Mhm.
it's something that I can't believe hasn't been discussed. And
I
whether you
feel like
feel,
something
and
like
you're, again, if you're, let me just, if you're listening to this and you're saying, "Oh, Trump is my hero," the reality is he could stay and have to be forcibly removed, whether
mhm.
you believe he should or not. And do you want our country to be represented to the world that way when we have been the example of transfer of power for over 200 years? Go ahead, Jack. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, I kind of forgot what I was going to say. Well, I don't know. I like chaos, as you know, and I hate Trump, so I would
Oh
love
yeah,
to see that.
great TV.
But Yeah,
Order a
I would watch
pizza.
it. I would watch it over and over again, eating popcorn and drinking beer until I passed out every night, and I'd wake up and start watching it again because it would amuse me that much. Kind of like these interviews with the protesters have been. I just sit and watch them all day. I'm like,
Yeah,
it's great. But honestly, I think that the past 4 years or so of kind of a lot of countries out there, because if you read like Reddit comments and comments from people from around the world who watch the show that's been happening
yeah, sure.
lately, they're just kind of going, I mean, we're just not shocked by any of this anymore, and we used to look up to you, and now we're just kind of afraid for you. We
Yeah,
worry about you, America. It's like you have that friend who you've been watching like slowly start nodding off, and he's got the track marks starting to show up in his arms. You're like, hey man, you might want to do something other than heroin. We're kind of worried about you. You stole your mom's purse. You did all this.
yeah,
I think, honestly, that's how a lot of countries out there are starting to view us right now. And that is absolutely not a good thing. And
yeah.
why I think that, we should go through and say, look, like, we got rid of him. I feel like Mike Pence would be looked down upon, not only, or it would be looked better upon, not only by history, but by other people in the world and in America. If he did 25th Trump and got him out of there, he'd be the man who got rid of, the guy that everybody hates.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would boost him, his political career too, should he want to run in 2024. Like, look, I took care of a problem. And I feel like it could be spun that way.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm feeling like the reason the 25th hasn't been done is because he just doesn't have enough people in the cabinet on board either,
He
which was
probably doesn't, and that
surprising.
here again, that's a terrible cause. I mean, if you've ever worked closely with somebody, under somebody, there is a certain amount of loyalty that you feel to them, rightly or wrongly.
All right.
And it's very hard to turn on someone to that degree, especially when it's going to be recorded in history forever. I mean, it's never going to go away.
All right.
It's never going to get forgotten about. 200 years from now, people will read your name.
Oh, I'm sure those people who were in that insurrection thing are going to end up in history books. And
Yeah.
I kind of wonder what their families are going to think
Well,
about it.
what was
Years
that?
from now, your grandkids see grandpa with a Blue Lives Matter flag beating a cop to death. Like, I mean,
Yeah, it's amazing to me that in this day and age, when cameras are everywhere, first of all, okay, they not only went in there, but they actually took selfies
oh,
of
yeah.
themselves sitting behind desks and figured that there's not going to be
Oh, yeah.
nobody's gonna know who you are.
And the ones who haven't gotten arrested yet are at the airports or everything. Within the next 6 months, are going to have a very rude surprise when the FBI comes through.
Yeah,
And that's one thing I really want to bring up before we go.
sure,
Is,
go ahead.
I've been seeing a lot of stuff online, and I've even had a couple people I've talked to, like actually in person, which doesn't happen much anymore because we're in the
No.
after times. But who have said, well, it just seems like the cops like treated these people with kid gloves, and like, you see the Black Lives Matter protesters like getting, maced and tased in the streets. And well, here's the thing. Not only did these people put tons of stuff up on social media that's never going away, like social media archives everything, even if you delete it. So, I mean, even if
Yeah,
you think you're smart and you're like, oh, well, I did something stupid, I should get rid of the evidence, it's still there.
it's
It
there
has to
forever.
stay there
Yep.
for a while. Number two, if you had a cell phone on you when you went into the Capitol building has their own internal cell phone tower. And
Yeah.
they know that your phone, when you get within X number of yards, if it's there, it's recorded. They're
Mhm.
going to find you. Um, and also, I mean, you willingly put this up on social media. A lot of these people they're going to be facing like 10 years. And the reason they're treating it with kids' gloves right now and saying, oh, well, we're charging them with trespassing right now is so that they have an avenue to make more serious charges stick after Biden
Yeah.
takes over.
Yeah, and
Therefore, Trump can't pardon these people. That's
they're
why
doing it.
they're doing that. And people are acting like, oh, well, they're just treating white people better. They're not. These people, their futures are effed. Like,
Yeah,
they're gone.
I don't think people realize, first of all, that they're using this time also to gather evidence and all these other things. And you're right about the capital and the ability to trace phones, but it's actually much easier than that.
Oh, it is. I'm just saying,
You
like, as an
which
absolute.
yeah, what you have now is because of social media, largely because of social media, but whether it be your driver's license picture, on the online pictures you've had taken at the bank, pictures, all these things, that there's a database that they can, with those pictures that were taken at the Capitol, they can run that face recognition and they can find you.
Oh, yeah.
and they can identify you, and then of course they don't have to go by the picture alone. As soon as they have a name, they investigate this name. Where was your phone? They can find you. You're at the Capitol. Where was your car? Where was this? And they have you. There's absolutely this is as Loctite as you can get. I mean, you might as well have just handed them your DNA.
Yeah.
It's just
Here's a
ridiculous.
fun fact, by the way. All that really that really advanced facial recognition software and everything. You know who that was originally developed for?
Hmm.
Casinos.
Oh, really? That makes sense.
Yep. Believe it or not.
That actually makes sense. That doesn't
People
surprise
you've
me.
kicked out, people who've owed money, people who, it makes it a lot easier on the casinos part. And then, governments and police agencies and even like social media and other types of kind of adapted it from there. But yeah, from what I've read, some of the first like facial recognition software, the more advanced stuff was made for casinos.
I
So,
believe it, and
um,
they have the money to develop it. That's for sure.
oh yeah. Um,
So yeah, so it's interesting times, and
absolutely.
I definitely would want people to keep their heads about them. And a lot of the things that I can speak for myself. A lot of the things I said about what our options are with Trump aren't necessarily because I like him or dislike him, but the situation is what it is. We have a potential to have a major disaster coming up on inauguration day, and whether you feel it's deserved or not is beside the point. It's just like that talk that came to Nixon. A lot of the people that came and gave him that talk probably feel that he didn't do that much wrong during
Right.
Watergate, but the situation came to what it came to. And I just hope that the next few weeks come peacefully. And I hope that we as a society can come together with some common sense and realize that we may differ on certain things, but I still I'm a kind of a holdout on humanity. I don't believe there's too many people out there that wake up in the morning feeling good about trying to put somebody else down. I don't feel that. I feel that most of us want everyone to have their fair share of success and opportunity.
Well, it's because
Um,
you don't hear from the normal people,
yeah, and I really do believe that though, and unfortunately, the haters are the people that get the attention.
Hmm.
We might differ on what the best way is to provide that opportunity, but at the end of the day, as they say, what's whose team are you on? We all should be on the same team. We want our society to function well. We want people to be successful and happy. I certainly do.
I feel like
And
most people are like being you, dude. Like we just want to get up, go to work, make
yep,
dinner, and just be left alone.
yep,
And apparently this day and age, it's kind of impossible to be left alone.
yes, it is. That's very true. Any parting words that you would like to give in hope of a better coming time?
Well, I'm going to be honest. I think there's going to be some more violence and rioting coming.
Yeah,
I absolutely believe it. And I mean, while I hope no one gets hurt, I mean, if you play stupid games, expect to win stupid prizes.
yep,
Just saying. And it's a shame that it's evolved as it has, but I'm also not really surprised. I mean, something was going to break eventually.
yeah,
I mean, it's like the pandemic and people losing their jobs and the inaction of Congress to do anything about it. Literally, like Canada, if you don't have a job because of COVID, they give you like $2,000 a month. Like
yeah,
we just got the what was it, $1,200? They're just like, well, you're on your own. And then
yep,
all the politicians sat back and watched them. The Lord of the Flies. Um, so I don't know. I'm just gonna say, stay safe. If you do want to go and protest, wear a mask. Just
yeah,
do it. And I don't know. I guess just stay furious,
yep.
but don't burn stuff down.
Don't burn stuff down. Stay safe, not only in terms of what's happening in society, but stay safe from COVID. Wear a mask. Do what you know the agencies are telling you about health.
Mm,
And that's kind of where I'm at. COVID has hit me in terms of economically. I don't mean I've gotten it, but
right.
it's hit me economically. And I want a good year. I want 2021 to be a good year. I don't care who the president is, Okay, I want a good year for myself. I want a good year for the fine, hardworking people in our country and in our society, and that's what I want, and for everyone. And let's hope we get it. Jack, as always, if you're new to the program, Jack Casey is one of our frequent co-hosts. He comes on here every once in a while, and we talk about current events. And this thing that's gone on here recently with the election and the Capitol and everything else. This was a good time to have him on. I always respect his opinion, Jack. Thank you very much for sitting in, and we'll have you on again, of
Yeah,
course.
anytime, man. May you all live in interesting times.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, is that a blessing or a curse?
Billy D's right here. As I mentioned, two recent author interviews, and go back through our playlist and check those out. Very good interviews. And also coming up, I have an interview that I'm very excited about. And I don't want to give her name just yet, but she is a hospice specialist. And she doesn't necessarily try to make you believe anything or not believe anything, but she has been bedside for hundreds of deaths and maybe even 1,000 or so. I'm not sure. We'll talk that to her when she's on. But she basically says that, and I believe this, there are some amazing consistencies in terms of what happens when people are quote unquote crossing over, in terms of talking to previously passed away friends and relatives and things like that. And some of it's a little spooky, and I don't know if it's for everyone, but the consistencies are very intriguing. And here again, I'm not necessarily a person of faith, but I believe that these consistencies are hard to ignore. And that interview is coming up in the next couple of weeks, and it's going to be a very in-depth interview. I'm very excited about that one, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, feel free to follow me on social media. You can find the Billy D's podcast on Facebook. You can find it on YouTube. And that's for the visual. The vast majority of our lessons, as I mentioned before, we're well established. We're not a newcomer to podcasting. We've been on Apple Podcast, formerly iTunes Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn. We've been on all those platforms for years. You can find us there. Tweet me at Billy D's on Twitter. Jack Casey, thanks for being on.
Hey, anytime, man. I look forward to
And
hearing that interview. That sounds like it's gonna be very interesting.
yeah, it does, doesn't it? I'm looking. I'm going to be listening and participating at the same time. I'm going to be very actively interested in that one. So until then, like I said, monitor our activities here on the Abilities podcast on your favorite social media, and we'll be talking to you again very soon. Thank you very much.